views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Karmic Path with your hosts, Tina Irwin and Laura Van Tyne. Join us as we dive into the normal and the paranormal to break through the darkness and to help you realize how karma, spiritual law, and psychic ability all combine to open the doors of understanding. This is the place where we build the karmic connections between science, psychology, and spirituality. But can we change our karmic path? Can we help someone else's karma? Stay tuned and join us for an opportunity to look at life and spirituality from a down-to-earth, no-nonsense, practical perspective. The Karmic Path radio show with Laura and Tina, Better Karma for Better Living, starts now. Welcome to the Karmic Path with Tina and Laura. And today's topic is, why don't religions make us feel safe and worthy? Or I got a subtitle too for you. Walking through a religious minefield. And this show isn't about bashing religions, but it's about what do religions do to us and for us on a spiritual and psychological level.
And we're going to kind of caveat this episode by discussing the name that people all over the world use for God. And I don't know if people know this, but we actually do research before we do episodes, depending on what the topic is.
We do.
We actually do quite a bit of research. And in our research, we came to understand that throughout the world, there are, or at least, this is not all inclusive, at least 1,000 names for God. 1,000 different names for God. And people we've spoken to said they don't like the fact that we use the word God. And some people don't they won't even use the word at all.
It's too Judeo-Christian, it's too this, it's too that, but it's just, we're going to just throw political correctness out the door, okay?
I mean, how long would it take us to say 1,000 different names to be politically correct and please everybody? And we could go through universal life force, the creator, the divine, the Lord, Father, Almighty, light of the world, the maker of all things and the light. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So we're going to just make it simple and go with 3 letters because sometimes simple is so much easier.
It is. So for the purposes of this show, we're just going to say God. We're going to we'll talk about religions and God and spirituality, and they're all related. And they're all related because we all have a karmic path, whether we're aware of it or not. And oftentimes we're born into our karmic path by the way of our faith and by the families that we choose to incarnate here with.
We choose to come in because we're supposed to have certain experiences. And sometimes the experiences we have involve a specific religious faith. And when we're born, we literally drop into an ongoing drama that is our family. And I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, but it bears repeating because when you drop into the drama of a family, it's as if you walk on stage in the middle of a drama, if you think about it, and now you're influencing that drama. And sometimes your family doesn't have a particular faith. You just walk in and it's a family. There's
still drama.
Oh my gosh, there's still going to be drama, but it may not involve going to a church, temple, synagogue, or
building of wood and stone of some sort. How's that?
Building of wood and stone. Okay.
All right. And we're not, like I said before, we're not here to bash religions, but we're going to be talking about what do religions do for us. And we're not singling out any particular religion or any particular faith. And, another thought about this is that a lot of religions, we talk about psychic ability and the paranormal a lot because this is an energetic field, a subtle energy, the paranormal world that impacts all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. And a lot of religions deny psychic ability, and they talk about the fact that, well, if you're psychic or you can see ghosts or whatever, then you must be the work of the devil. You must be.
Over and over.
Yes, actually, years ago, I had one of my daughters had a friend over and the mom came over and I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, because my front door was painted black, it's a black door, I was a devil worshiper.
Can't make this up.
So I'm like, okay, lady, if you really knew. So I guess what prompted this show today, and what prompted this show was a client came to us because she had a cancer diagnosis. And we're not doctors. We don't prescribe anything, give advice about anything, but we look at the emotional connections that people have with an illness. And a really great book is Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. She talks about the emotional connection that we have with our illnesses.
And Laura pointed this out because we were very careful to explain to this woman that we don't have any diplomas on the wall. We're just going to talk to you about a potential emotional connection to what could be causing your breast cancer. Because if you look at the medical community, they treat things. Nobody heals things anymore. You're
treating the symptom.
You're constantly treating the symptom. To find out what's going to cause you to heal, you have to look at the underlying emotional element or value there, because we are our emotions. It's pretty fascinating.
And let's give a little quick example. A lot of times when somebody has something as simple as a sore throat, what's the metaphor?
The metaphor is that something is painful to talk about. And the easiest way to look at this example is little girl birthday parties.
Oh, they're a joy.
Deliver me from little girl birthday parties or teenage parties, and your kid all of a sudden develops a sore throat and you can't put your finger on it. And so you put them on your lap, and I have a sore throat and I can't go to school. And you're talking to them about it, and they go, and I'm going, what's going on at school? What's going on? It's nothing. It's nothing. There's something going on. Somebody hurt your feelings. Yeah, so-and-so's having a birthday party, and Mary and Sue and Jane and Courtney are all invited, but they didn't invite me. And I said, so that hurt your feelings? Yes. And then the child cries, and you tell her it's okay, that you're going to go out and have lunch, you go to the movies, and you're going to have your own little fun day, and that it's going to be all right. You come back a couple hours later. Gee, how's your throat? What throat? I don't have a sore throat. I mean, this works for adults too.
It's like magic.
It's like mommy magic.
Right.
I used it for a lot of years and saved hours not going to the doctor because it was
sometimes a sore throat might be strep or something like that, but
sometimes it is. Occam's razor. The simplest
right.
solution really is the easiest one. So that's a tiny example, but a larger example, breast cancer can mean many things. And some of it is the metaphor for breast cancer a lot of times is a very sad heart. And that can come because maybe somebody made you have an abortion, or maybe you had a miscarriage, or you lost a child, or you were a victim of sexual abuse.
And women will have a sad heart represents breast cancer, but men have heart attacks.
And
they're broken heart, right?
They become broken hearted. Women can have heart attacks too. Don't get me wrong. They can have that too. So you have to look at what's the underlying, if you can figure that out, or a grief that's not expressed. There's many, many ways. So getting back to our client, because I know we're going, around the bend here a bit with this. So we asked her if any of these things had happened, and she said, nope, I have great kids, a wonderful husband.
Yeah, no abortion, no miscarriages,
nothing
never lost a child. There was no sexual abuse in her life. None of those things happen. In fact, she has great kids, a great husband, a wonderful family, a wonderful extended family, great friendships, and all of these wonderful things. And she's a wonderful, wonderful person. Yeah. So what happens?
In very carefully kind of questioning her, because we're working blind. We're working on the phone, just kind of trying to put the pieces together. And basically what she told us was that we said, had anything traumatic happened? And she said, well, I've been a particular faith all of my life. I grew up in this faith. My family's this faith, but something happened with our kids, and they didn't want to be
a part of their church, a part of their religion.
That's right.
And, they're young adults, and that, I think that's normal. I think a lot of of parents when their kids become young adults decide that they don't want to be a part of this church. They want to explore and create their own identity.
That's not an unusual thing, but basically the entire family left this church. And since this woman had been told that if she left the church, that she would be sentenced to hell, then her guilt overwhelmed the body. Guilt is a really, really powerful emotion.
And we've said this in the past, and this is one of those karmic path sayings: guilt always seeks punishment.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
You're trying to get back on your chair.
I feel like I'm in this high camel saddle or something.
Okay, so Tina's about 9 inches shorter than me, and so in order for the cameras to work for us, she has to sit on this mound of pillows. Sorry, Tina, I blew your secret.
That's okay. It's not a big secret. So we asked this woman, would she be open to other kinds of healing? And it's very seldom somebody says no to this, but she said no. No, I'll be all right. Well, obviously you're not all right, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. And we kept talking about some of the concepts of healing, and she kept saying, no, I'm not worthy. Whoa, wait a minute. Why would such a wonderful mother and wife and friend, all around great person, not be worthy of healing?
Right.
And that question was so astounding for us. And we said, but why? She says, I'm a sinner. I'm not worthy. I'm going to be punished because I'm leaving the church. And all I could think of was, what kind of church wouldn't graciously accept her decision? What kind of church would sentence her to hell? So that church in that moment didn't keep her safe.
Right. And this is a really, I think, an exquisite point to bring up, is that religions, and there are a lot of good churches, a lot of good basis for religions, but there are a lot of little caveats that may not be for our greater good. And I think these are karmic tests that we have. This is a karmic test of, are you worthy? Do you feel worthy, I should say, or do you not feel worthy if you make a decision that goes against the flow, basically?
And so when we come back, we're going to talk about what happened to this woman and her healing path. And you're listening to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Karmic Path Radio with Tina and Laura on Transformation Talk Radio. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Oil Lounge. Check them out if you get a chance to. They sponsor the show, and we're so grateful for them. All right, so we are talking about what religions can do to us spiritually and psychologically. And we're talking about one specific example of the ability of not feeling worthy.
Well, if you're constantly confessing your guilt, and if you don't confess your guilt, then you're guilty. If you do confess your guilt, that you're guilty. So you're guilty 365 days a year. So you never have a day when you're not guilty for something.
Do you remember a couple years ago when you helped somebody cross over their mother who didn't cross over? It was this little old lady, and you're working with her, and she's like, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes. I had a client who said that she knew her mother.
She's psychic. She can read my mind.
I had a client whose mother-in-law was beloved. You know what it takes to be a beloved mother-in-law? I'm here to tell you it's not easy. And everybody adored this woman. And when she died, my client, who was the daughter-in-law, could feel her with her. And she said, I think my mother-in-law needs some help crossing over. And we found her and we were talking to her, and she said, well, I'm not worthy. God couldn't love me. I was born in sin and I'm going to die in sin. And
well, talk about being hopeless.
Talk about being hopeless. And I said, but didn't you go to church 3 times a week, twice on Sunday, and you did every bake sale and you baked yourself into oblivion? I mean, really? She said, yes, but I was born in sin and I died in sin because that's what my pastor said. So I'm never going to be worthy of God's love. And I wonder how many pastors actually hear it on a different level, if they could understand that they're literally sentencing their really conscientious,
good people,
if their flock to literally to hell. And I don't believe that that's their real intention. They want people to feel like they're not going to do bad things. So getting back to our lady with breast cancer, because I want to complete the loop here. We explained this very concept that if you're constantly confessing your sins to a mortal person who might not have clean skirts, literally.
What? Say what?
They might not have really clean skirts. And that leaving this was a new experience and it wasn't something to be guilty for. She really wasn't going to be, quote, excommunicated and sent to hell. And she said, okay, well, I guess I can accept healing. And and we pointed out that this wasn't, this doctrine was never going to be helping her. So leaving was actually for her greater good. If she could find maybe there's a faith she wanted, or she wanted to explore something on her own, God was going to love her anyway.
And we talked about the faith of nature. And we talked about, going out and communing with nature. That is also a spiritual experience.
Well, it's the gospel of St. Thomas that, God doesn't live in buildings of wood and stones, open up a rock or turn over a rock and you will find me. I mean, God is everywhere. You don't have to have a mortal person stand in front of you as God's representative. Anyone can be their own representative, which was Martin Luther's concept of the priesthood of all believers. So I guess the moral of the story is, what happened to this woman?
Well, she, did the cancer leave her? We don't know. I think this is, and she's one of many people.
You see, there's a nation of people.
It's not just, and one person or whatever, but this is what religions and programming, childhood programming can do.
Excellent point. Good job, Laura.
Thank you. I have my moments.
Your moments. It is childhood programming. That's exactly what it
is. We are born into our faiths, and as we grow and learn and have experiences, because we incarnate into these bodies on this planet for the experiences our soul needs for our soul path, for our soul evolution. And if we are born into a faith and perhaps we outgrow that faith, or we realize its limitations, we can have hopefully an opportunity to choose something else to help us on our karmic path. Or if we find that our faith serves us well and we keep going with it, that also serves our karmic path.
I remember that before I go to that comment, I want to end this with, we don't know what happened to her, but her guilt was so tremendous. Again, guilt will always seek punishment. And so now I'm switching subjects to a comment that the Dalai Lama made. And he was visiting someone recent in some context many years ago. And I saw a photograph of him and he was greeting a rabbi. And I saw these two men as they were reaching to shake hands, and there was so much admiration in their eyes for each other. It's as if
that transcends religion.
It transcends. One man had enormous respect for the other. There was no difficulty there. There was, wow, these two men had great respect, and actually you could see it in their faces. There was a lot of affection there for the kindness each man was showing. And I think that was really a really great thing to see. And I guess what we're asking is, what is it about faiths that seem to look kind of the same on the outside? So let's say that you have a faith that has an enormous amount of people on the planet who are part of this faith. I mean, billions of people are in this faith. But the faith is divided into 3 different sects.
Well, my sect is better than your sect. I'm kidding.
And this guy's the enemy, and you're the enemy, but maybe the enemy of my enemy might be friends today, but maybe not tomorrow. And so we're going to kill each other because they have the right. One sect is the best one more than the other. And how many wars have been fought over this?
This brings up a good point. I seriously suspect that more people have died in the name of God than any other reason on this planet. And is that what God wants?
Well, I'm really psychic, but I don't have it in knowing what God wants, so I'm not going to be.
It's a rhetorical question. But more people die on this planet in the name of God, in the name of their religion, than any other thing.
Exactly.
And what purpose does that serve us?
Well, if you're angry at another group and you take one of your group and you strap them with bombs and you get them to blow up another group, how is that furthering anyone's karmic path? Because violence begets violence.
Well, and then we reincarnate here from a lot of times they don't cross over, because when you're in this vicious cycle, you're not going to necessarily cross over, and they keep reincarnating and playing out these same scenarios over and over and over.
And the belief that martyrdom will somehow get you into heaven is really, I would be blunt enough to say that it's really misguided. And when you have this massive particular faith that is the largest pedophile ring on the planet and allowed to sexually abuse children, and when confronted,
organized pedophilia ring. Okay,
it's the largest organized crime ring.
This one gets me going.
Okay, go ahead.
I just
take the floor. Breathe. Breathe. It's okay.
We have, and I'm going to say this, that Tina and I have crossed over so many children who have died, who at the hands of a religious organized pedophilia ring. It breaks your heart. And they could have lived a full life and they've committed suicide, or they could have died in childhood. When your faith promotes pedophilia, that's a problem. When you hide it, it's criminal. It's beyond criminal.
And what makes it, we're now going into the paranormal. We're going to switch our paranormal switch on. Why is it so egregious? And it's egregious because that person represents themselves as a messenger or representative of God on earth. And when that person commits a heinous act that's a mortal sin, and what that person does is they separate that child from God. If God's representative can do this to me, obviously God could never love me. So they've now separated that child from God for I don't know how long, but it's a long enough time that the egregious is the only word. And when we find them in the lower astral and we offer them enormous loving comfort, and I can't begin to tell you how poignant it is for us to, and we're not sitting in judgment of them. We just bring them help and cross them over.
We cross them over
as an act of pure service.
And there's a lot out there. And a lot of times they're young men who commit suicide or die by drug overdose that we find in the lower astral. And they are in so much pain. And the fact that a certain religious institution can keep shuffling their religious leaders around to hide the problem, to silence the victims, is absolutely atrocious.
And that they're paying $7 billion a year in reparations and declaring bankruptcies. They're also the largest landholder on the planet.
And so
you probably never guess who we're talking about.
We should probably get off the soapbox because this one boils my blood. I got to be honest with you. So when does your religion make you feel safe? And as a member of that faith, how could a parent feel their child is safe in that religious institution?
Because you never know. It's been kept secret for so long. So you never know if this religious leader is going to be the one who is going to do the next harm.
Yeah. So anyways, I think we need to take a break and cool off a minute.
Cool off. So you're listening to Transformation Talk Radio. We're the Karmic Path, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. We had somebody ask a pretty good question, and that was, oh my gosh, I forgot the question already.
The question was, why should you cross over a pedophile?
Oh, yes, thank you.
I remember that quite clearly. And the answer is because they'll just reincarnate from the fourth dimension and do it again, life after life after life. If you cross them over, because life after life after life, it's like you shave off and shave off and shave off more and more of their soul.
When a person reincarnates from the fourth dimension and not from the heaven world, again, we're talking semantics here, we're talking above, not below. When they reincarnate without having access to the heaven world, they don't get the healing and soul restoration and the guidance that the divine provides. And they come back more and more broken each time.
And and they may come back really broken, and then they don't quite have the conscience. And I mean, not everybody who enters a school to learn to be quote man of God, and there are women of God, but there should be men of God who actually care. And I think that there are, but I think that the bad ones are so prevalent. This is a case where the ones who aren't are the exception. The ones who are, and they've been around a long time. And I'll use it for an example. When I was 9, my family was a member of the Catholic Church, and after the fourth child, my parents figured out how to manage birth control, and so I'm 9 years old. I go into the confessional, and I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I'm busy all the time. I don't have time to sin. I work really hard. And the priest says, your parents are living in sin and they're going to go to hell. And, only I can really save them. And, and I'm thinking, what does that mean? He says, well, they're doing birth control. And I didn't know what that meant.
You're 9.
I'm 9. I'm 9. I mean, I don't have the sex education the state of California has right now where they explain this to 3rd graders. So I did not know how this worked. And he says, but you must never tell your parents. This is something that only you and I will know about. And I said, I don't think so. I came out and I started sobbing and screaming and crying, and nobody knew what to do with me. I go home, and it's like someone turned a switch and my mother went berserk. And we left the church, never looked back. I am so grateful to that priest, because I never have to go back to that horrible place again.
But here's what happened, though. That priest was trying to separate you from your parents. If he can separate you from your parents, he can then start to do other forms of manipulation.
And that's exactly what this is. And I really wasn't going to bring this up, but I feel like this is a personal experience. So that's why it's important. And when it didn't go very far, because, I'm not going to let anybody separate me from my parents. I made it as kind of a feisty 9-year-old. And so
she's a feisty over 9-year-old too. Okay.
when a clergyman does this, they damage the root chakra of a child. I was not sexually abused, for which I'm truly grateful. But when a clergyman does this to children,
or anyone, or
anyone has any incest or anything else, this means that you've damaged the root chakra, which is
the creative center, the energetic center of the soul, and that becomes damaged. Now, when a priest or somebody higher or of quote unquote God authority does something like this, they are held to a higher standard. They should know better.
And the same thing is true in other faiths. When other faiths create guilt and shame or hate, and this isn't just about the Catholic Church.
And it's a control issue, right?
It becomes very much a control issue. And if your faith has to control the flock, and it's us against the world, or the script. Some faiths have a script, and we've all heard the script. And there was actually a very funny thing that happened. This woman was at a party, and this very elderly lady looks at my friend and she says, "Honey, have you found Christ?" And she jumps up and she says, "Oh my God, Christ is missing." She started opening doors and closets, and people were, you could hear a pin drop in the room. And they said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, she asked me if I found Christ. I didn't know he was missing. So I decided to look for it. I'm going to go home and look." And she ran out of the house. I know that for people who are devoutly Christian, that's probably not funny, but it begs the question. When someone says that, that's part of a script, and it defines a group. And if you only feel safe inside that group because they know the answers to the script, it's like the secret handshake. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that's really where we're going.
That's a really good point. And when you go outside of that script and you're punished for it, that's a problem.
So I guess that now the next phase is, what is the purpose of religion? And I think religions originally started out to
guide and be helpful,
to understand what constitutes a sin. In other words, if you're sleeping with somebody's wife, you kind of have to know that's wrong. If you kill somebody, yep, that's going to be a really bad thing to do. So your normal common sense, and what they were redoing, I think what they intended to do was to reinforce the difference between right and wrong, lying and telling the truth and being honest and true and caring
somewhere
about other people.
I think somewhere along the way, greed became a factor. Control becomes a factor.
Well, the reason this one particular faith never allowed their men of God to marry was because then when family members died, all of the property went to that church. Since you're not allowed worldly goods, they became the largest landholder on the planet. It's like study history here. It's all about the politics of what you can hold. What are your holdings?
But there are religions. Now, I grew up in a Methodist community, and it was very open and welcoming and not super structured and super rigid. I mean, you bring a dish to pass and guess what? You're Methodist. I mean, but but that was this particular location, and it was a good place to be because it was a community center. It was a family center. And I don't remember growing up in judgment and in fear and all of those things.
I think this is what initially started the whole New Age movement. So many people became disillusioned with the faith of their family. And they were disillusioned or hurt or felt lost. And they're trying to find a new connection to God. And that basically started a lot of different karmic paths for people. I think that there are faiths on the planet who are kind and gentle, who open up doorways of understanding. And when you can trust the world around you, maybe religions don't need to be quite as rigid. Maybe they can have more of a sociological element, meaning they are fostering kindness. They bring people together. They teach people, I don't know, cook, or they help with after school care, or they're looking at ways to support a community. Because it used to be that a religious group was your community.
Right. Yeah.
That's not right or wrong or good or bad. That was your community. But when people from the outside came in, if they weren't part of your group, they were outsiders. Doesn't have to be that way. I think that religions can free themselves from constantly issuing chronic guilt.
Well, and maybe religions can update things.
Oh, you mean like not treating women as chattel?
Yeah, that would be one. But looking at things and updating things, religious texts were written by men. They were not written by some, high divine being. They were interpretations, they're metaphors. And what if we look at these things with a slightly different eye? Can you imagine what we could learn?
Well, imagine that you were to embrace the contributions of women. In other words, to turn away from 50% of the population. Some faiths do that. Only men can be high people of God. Women now,
high people of God. Is that a technical term?
There are some faiths. I remember my mother-in-law was so angry because her church went from a male minister to a female minister, and she never went back. She was programmed only men can be ministers. That's not true anymore.
My stepmom's church had switched. They fired their pastor because he was gay, and the congregation left. They were not going to follow that doctrine of that
because he was a good guy.
He was a good guy. He did amazing things, and he was fired because he was gay, and it didn't matter to these people that he was gay.
What should matter is that you have a community. You're going to have all kinds of people in a community. And I think that when religions are able to look at how do we make people more inclusive, think about how great that could be. And I think that when you can look at that and include women in things and not look at women as second class citizens, and there's some massively large faiths on the planet
And we're
that
at a
don't
point,
like women's hair. I mean, it always has to be
I
covered
know,
forever.
right? I know. God doesn't hate women's hair.
God does not hate women's hair.
But
It just always bothered me.
imagine if we can take what we know and what rings true for us and bring those goodnesses forward. Imagine what that can do.
Imagine if you were to marry someone else, quote, outside of your faith, and it didn't bring dishonor on your family and you get murdered because you brought dishonor on your family because the person you married wasn't of your faith. I mean, there are a lot of women killed every year because of that.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back and talk about something, a new element of this.
A different element of this. And you are listening to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. Please check out theoillounge.com. They've got a lot of really cool stuff there. Sign up for their email list if you haven't done that. They send something out about once a month, so it's not really going to clog your inbox either. So we will be right back.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. And we're discussing why don't many faiths make us feel safe
And worthy.
and worthy. I think that for me, watching some faiths that really insist that women have 8, 10, or 12 or 14 children, and that if they're not constantly multiplying, that somehow they're not making the faith work really well. I think if faiths were to look at the challenge it is for women and for families
and for the planet.
And for the planet, it might give them a different viewpoint. Anyway.
Yeah. And a lot of faiths will condemn people to hell if they don't do or don't think or don't follow certain doctrines. And that doesn't make us feel safe because those doctrines are generally man-made. But if we don't do it, then we're not safe. And, was it the Council of Nicaea in
528 BC? No, 1428.
One of the Council of Nicaea, they actually took out the concept of reincarnation. So now you only have one shot to do this right. You only have one mortal shot to live this life. And if you don't follow this doctrine, then you're going to go to hell for eternity. The truth is that we do come back life after life. We don't live just one mortal lifetime on the planet. We don't live one mortal lifetime, die, and sit on the cloud and play the harp forever or burn up in flames forever.
Or meet 27 virgins.
Or that too. So it's a concept designed to instill fear and guilt to control people. And we aren't really in that fire and brimstone era that we used to be, but there are subtleties, and we're talking about those subtle energies of what this guilt can feel like and what it can manifest in on a subconscious level. So back again to the client that we had, it was a subroutine in her subconscious about feeling worthy. Where do those things come from?
It comes from really early programming. And it also comes from the subtlety of most people come back from the fourth dimension.
Yeah.
They don't come back from the heaven world. So they don't get anybody to help them understand the subroutines that they're experiencing.
And we talked about that previously. And if a soul dies and does not cross over, they're a ghost. And that ghost lives in the fourth dimension. And over time, they will reincarnate back here on this planet from that fourth dimension without the healing and soul restoration that we all need.
And one of the things that's really would be really good for faiths all over the world to do, and there are 1 or 2 faiths that actually do this, and that would be if they told people what's going to happen when they die, because most people have no idea. So they don't feel safe when death is coming to them. Think about that. Do you know what to do when you die? And if the answer is, do you know what's going to happen? I mean, you take your last breath, then what?
Right.
And how many faiths actually sit you down and say, okay, we're going to get you ready here because we're going to have this happen, and we're going to make it not scary. We're going to help you out here. We're going to help your family. We're going to teach you.
We're going to teach you what to do when you die.
We're going to teach you what to do when you die, because you're not going to cease. You're not going to become compost.
And
you're
if
going
we
to keep living, you just keep living on.
If we did this, imagine the amount of ghost prevention this would be.
Well, imagine how much less fear and terror a person would have at their death. I bet if you were to ask a clergyman of any faith, and we're just using the word clergyman, but it could be fill in the
pastor,
blank
rabbi, whomever.
Anyway,
yeah.
What's going to happen when I die? How should I prepare? And they'll say, make sure your soul's in good shape. That doesn't tell you the mechanical process, what's going to happen to your body at death. And the Tibetans in the Buddhist religion do that. If you read the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche, that is one of the best treatises on what happens at death. It's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And I have studied this book for years. It's all practically coming apart because I studied it for so long. And it's very logical, and it's very compassionate, extremely compassionate. It's an experience we're all going to have. So to understand it and to face your death without fear, anxiety, or terror,
and face it with dignity,
and enable your family to help you with the process. It can be a beautiful community event, because you're going to slip from this mortal frame that's maybe it's old and it's tired, or it's full of disease, or it's just crippled with arthritis, to be able to feel like you can bring in an angel and help that person to make this glorious transition. What a profound spiritual service that would be. I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox again.
I'll just say, drink some coffee. No, I'm kidding. And it's interesting how sometimes there's synchronicities that come by. And Tina and I both read the Urantia book, and we get
you should spell that.
Urantia, Urantia book. And I also subscribe. They send out like a daily quote via email. And one of the quotes as we're preparing for the show this week was, "It's a fallacy for any group of religionists to conceive of their creed as the truth. Such attitudes bespeak more of the theological arrogance than of certainty of faith." And I think we need to dissect that a little bit.
Just because the Urantia syntax is a little bit convoluted.
Yeah. So it's a fallacy for any group of religionists to think that what they believe is the absolute truth. And when we believe that my religion is the absolute truth, the only truth, it lends to a certain amount of arrogance and ego that can help trip us up.
And in a certain sense, every faith on the planet believes they're the chosen one. I'm going to tell you, I know I'm not. Not the chosen one.
Yeah.
The humility and the ordinariness of each of us is the truth. The connection each of us, because you can see this connection right here,
right,
can have with the divine is an absolute truth.
And our goal for this show is to talk about what it's about our spiritual growth, about our spirituality, and the psychology that we have behind it. And what can we do? It's to be thought-provoking. It's to be realizing that, maybe there's more than one way. Maybe, just maybe.
And that maybe that's part of the soul evolution of the planet, when more and more people can see that one way isn't the only way. Okay, so we're going to end this, and you have something else.
I do.
Share.
So, one final observation is that, no religion will tell us what actions take upon death. We know that. That's a recap. But no religion has the whole truth. We all have bits and pieces, and Tina and I read and study everything that we can, because not one piece of information has everything. We talked about the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. We've talked about the Urantia book, and we read all the time. We're trying to put pieces of the puzzle together. So with that, study, learn, find out what rings true for you. But before we leave, I want to talk about last week's show.
Okay, go ahead.
Last week's show was absolutely amazing. We had Raquel from the Oil Lounge on. She's a former 911 operator, and she told us what every 911 operator wants everyone to know to save a life. She gave us some amazing, compelling stories, what you should tell your children, how you should teach your children to be safe, what to do when may need to call 911. It's a fabulous show, and it's worth just repeating because it is worth its weight in gold. And we can't thank her enough for all of those, little golden nuggets of wisdom there. So it was absolutely amazing.
Please feel free to share that show. I think you'll find that it will do a lot of physical and spiritual service for a lot of people.
And you can find it on thekarmicpath.com or on our Facebook page of the Karmic Path. And with that, we want to thank the amazing Kat Grebe for doing such a great job, taking care of us every week. We really appreciate her. And you are listening to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Karmic Path radio show. Listen live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time as we explore the fascinating elements of karma and how to make those critical connections between spirituality, science, and psychology. Both of us are seasoned psychics living ordinary lives in public education and the military. Tina and I both have a deep-rooted dedication to learning how the unseen world works and to share this knowledge. Learn how to create a heightened sense of understanding and karmic awareness for greater personal balance with the Karmic Path. For more information, visit thekarmicpath.com.